So, James, we're here to talk about our books and
Yeah.
let's have a gander at those. This is your book, James. It's a fantastic book. This is your memoir, and this is
Thank
my
you.
memoir.
Yay.
I first bought Black Punk Now because I know you. And I was like, okay, let's see what's up. And you said, no, buy High Desert. And I said, okay. And I did. And it was, and it showed up. And I literally read it in one day. And then I gave it to my kid who's 14, and he read it in one day. And it's now one of his favorite books.
Oh, yeah, thank you for that. That's very sweet. And likewise, you like post the things and you post the blurbs, and I'm like, oh wait, people like this. Let me let me check it out. And I was so pleasantly surprised. Like most punk memoirs, especially if they're written without any help, are not very good because not everybody's a writer, you know? And you are absolutely a writer. I've been recommending it to everyone I know. So,
Oh, well, thanks. And I mean, I've been doing the same. Something that you said that I loved was that you enjoyed the audiobook version.
but yours was a delight. You're like totally animated. You've like inspired me on how audiobooks can be read. It's like a performance. You sound like sarcastic when you're supposed to. I mean, the sarcasm really comes through. Like
Go with your strengths, I always say.
you sing a cappella on it, which is like, wow.
Thank you. I'm really grateful you said that, and I'm glad you liked it. It's like one thing that we have talked about in the past is the celebrity aspect of all art, really. And I kind of, naively wished that the literary world would somehow be different, but it isn't. It's a business, and within that, like the celebrity culture rules, and lots of people who aren't writers will get book deals, and you can also not get a book deal, especially in something that's pop culture oriented like music, if you're not a celebrity. So I definitely heard, I know you said you had like 40 plus rejections, and I was right up there too. And definitely heard really demoralizing things like, yeah, I love the writing. Who is she? I can't tell this. She's nobody. And I did take that sort of to heart. So when I went to read it, I was like, this is me. Whether it fails or whatever, it's going to be full on. I'm going to try and hit the jokes. I'm going to attempt accents. It's going to be like a circus, like a one woman, and like, and I
Yeah.
did just sort of try to leave it all on the stage.
At the end of the day, like at the end of the end, we have this thing for our kids. I let her read it when she was 11 or 12. And I was like, you're in middle school. This book takes place in middle school. Hopefully, you won't have to deal with any of this stuff. And I remember seeing her like close the book. And she put her hand on my shoulder and she was like, relatable. I don't know what kind of compliment I could expect from a kid, especially my
Your
kid.
kid, exactly, your own kid.
Um, and I was mindful, like I did. There are only like 4 or 5 curse words in it. There's a whole lot of like screw yous instead of fuck yous. Like that kind of stuff.
Were you thinking about her being it being something that she would read when you made those choices, or is it more that it came out with HarperCollins?
It goes back to like one of the early rejections, or maybe the first rejection.
Mm.
He said it's just like, oh man, there's just way too much cursing in this. I just for fun like did a like search for fuck, and I was like, oh, there's like 80 fucks in this. Like, I feel like it's a little lazy,
80
you
fucks
know?
given. Yes. We're writing about our younger selves 30 years later. Sometimes it does feel like a different person. It's also interesting to write about that younger person, trying to be fair to everybody else too. I think you did that well. I certainly tried to do that well. I mean, when you're talking about fairness too, in your book, you were writing about a lot of young people that were doing terrible things. And I wondered whether you had any moral compunction about writing, seeing this, they're now like 40, if they're still alive, 40 and 50-year-old men, you're kind of outing them for having done that then. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I wondered if you juggled that. I know I had some feelings about who I was going to mention by name, who I was going to change their name, or
Nobody outside of that immediate town of 100,000 people would even know who any of these people were. Me and Joey Ramone are the only people whose names aren't changed in the book. In my next book, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because there are people who are Googleable and the other thing that I ended up coming to terms with in writing this book is that throwing three people under the bus, like I don't feel like that is good memoir. I what I wanted to do was expose myself, you know, to talk, to
Mm,
be vulnerable about my experiences. You know, I stuck with facts. Yes, there were Nazis. Yes, there were kids who wanted to jump me and the other black kid for our boots. Like, yes, this stuff happened. And yes, like there were times where my friends weren't didn't treat me well, you know.
mhm.
And but if I'm honest, there are times that I was as well. And I think it's actually more interesting to write me, you know, like not being there for my friends when they need them, when they need me,
Sure,
right?
sure. Yeah,
As
yeah,
a
yeah,
reader, you're like, oh, this person is admitting to something that we're all guilty of.
yeah.
So this endears me to to
Well,
the
that's
author.
what I'm, yeah, that's kind of what I mean about writing about that younger self too. You know, some of the fumbly bumbly nonsense and like the times I was sort of self-righteous or I thought I was right and everybody else was an idiot. I mean, I do a sex list in my book, you know, and it could be a list of vengeance. I started it with names and particularly the date rape one. Like I was like, I'm gonna out him. I'm gonna say his name. I don't care, you know, and all
Yeah.
this stuff. And it became clear to me that this was silly. Like this, everybody was in their own mess. Like none of us had it figured out. Showed up to the game of dating, figured out, had great parental role models, you know, and I mean, some people were worse than others and more selfish and nasty, and but mostly we were just kind of bumbling around.
Yeah.
There was definitely sexism, misogyny, all this stuff. So those are the things I was really talking about, and the unkindness with which we sort of use each other, especially in a place like New York, maybe where everybody's there to sort of get away from something or get strive for something. You know, there's this element of usiness, and so that enters into relationship, and that can be quite ugly. But then I just, you know, took out the names because it was so apparent that that wasn't what needed to be done. But I left in the name of the date rape guy, and because I did feel very much like, not on my watch, I'm not going to be quiet, you know,
Hmm.
I'm not going to be silenced. My publisher said this could be problematic, and I just like every part of me was on fire. You know, it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely not. It's my book. I was really furious because I was being silenced in a situation where I'd been silenced. So it made sense that my emotional response was that. But I have a lovely editor who had a conversation and said, you should do whatever you want to do, and I'll be right behind you. But here's what I think. And when I thought about it more, and after that conversation, it was really like, I'm talking about humanity. I'm talking about the ways in which we hurt each other, we damage each other, how that happened to me, and how it affected me.
You don't necessarily want the story to be that. The one that comes to mind is like Jada Smith's book, which I haven't read. She sat down just like us and wrote 100,000 words or more in over the course of a couple years or whatever. And the only thing people could talk about is that
Mm,
she reveals that her and Will Smith haven't been together in like 8 years or something, right? Maybe it sold more books and maybe people read more of her story and whatever, you know. But if like that's what people are talking about, it's like, is that what the book's about? You know, or is that like a small section in a much
salacious
larger
detail that,
story?
yeah. But also it became a little bit like, you know, well, that guy's bad. You know, that sort of whack-a-mole approach of like bad people, as if it's people that are bad rather than the state of humanity as supported by terrible systems, you know. And that's really what, when you're talking about the human condition, you're talking about, you know, talking about some stupid idiot that, you know, isn't even on Facebook, so I can't even stalk him now. I mean, like, what's that all?
It's memoir, so sometimes it feels really self-indulgent, you know.
Mhm.
And I'm always asking myself, like, does anyone care about this? When I find myself asking that, it's usually because this particular detail or this particular paragraph uh, is self-indulgent. You know, it is kind
Mm.
of insider baseball. It is like something that just me and my friends would care about.
So your
Um,
bullshit detector gets kind of finely tuned, right? And when you're going in that
yeah,
direction, you can sense it kind of
yeah.
out
But
there.
when I realize that what I'm doing, I'm telling this story because I'm trying to validate someone else, an anonymous reader, or I'm trying to build a community, then I know that I'm doing the right thing. Be vulnerable, be painfully honest. Think about your favorite movie or your favorite book or your favorite painting and ask yourself why it's your favorite. It's probably because it's doing something or saying something that you want to say, but or would never have the words to say. Whatever is like killing you inside, you know, like make that your work because it's killing somebody else too. Then your thing will be somebody's favorite. AfroPunk the film just started off as I was very angry at like kind of mod hipster rock and roll New York scene. This very like oddly white community in a very diverse city, New York City, you know? And I was like broken. Too much white liberalism and like race doesn't matter had shattered me. And in my version of picking up the pieces was to create this movie where I just talked to other black punks. Punk is an extreme, but then if you put the tech to the black punks, like that's the extreme of that extreme, and then it's also the extreme of black people, right? So if we can humanize our experience in this extreme, then everyone else who is punk or is black or is a weirdo or anything will also find like humanity in themselves, right? In this world that wants to dehumanize us, you know? It was a 2-year process of making that film and 8 hours a day of editing and, you know, a nighttime of partying. So by the time that it was finished, I'm not gonna say I'm totally healed, but I was good. I was close. And then I started showing it and meeting all these other people who it was validating, and then I was becoming healed, you know? So then it's like, oh, this whole thing is a community effort. It's just about like, are you willing to say the thing that no one else is willing to say?
In an interview the other day, somebody asked me, do you think you would have been able to write this book if Me Too hadn't happened? And I said, truthfully, I'd still be writing this book, but he makes a good point that would the receptivity be there? I don't know. I've always been unapologetically feminist. Similarly to you saying it's an oddly white scene, which it is, I felt a lot of times where I had to defend my use of the word feminist. Do you think that the fact that our memoirs have come out might be part of some good sign that there is more room or space, or is it still sort of like piecemeal?
I would love to believe that we're living in a more feminist world. Like in the long arc of history, I think that that's true. And I think that, you know, the same thing as when we talk about racism, it's like in the long arc of history, we're much better off than we were at other points. In that our lifetime
Nitty
kind of
gritty
thing,
of the, yeah.
it's like, you know, oh, well, you know, like Roe v. Wade was reversed. And like, you know, it's like there's book bans about like children's books about that just have black characters that are being banned, you know, like it's definitely feels like, oh wait, are we better, you know? And maybe some of that is because it's in reaction to Me Too. It's in reaction to you know, the murders of George Floyd and the uprising after. I'll tell you straight up, like I got all of those rejections, and I was just like, all right, whatever, I'm going to keep writing my book. And then the uprisings around George Floyd happened, and Starbucks is all of a sudden standing with Black people, and you know, Aunt Jemima gets to retire, you know, and I'm like, I'm gonna get a book deal, you know. So like, I mean, I did all the protests too. I don't want you to think I was just all of a sudden the publishing industry was like, oh, we're supposed to take care of Black people, you know, like, and you know, and I think that Me Too has done that, you know, like, yay, they're giving us a chance, you know.
Being a woman and being a Black man in punk world, it was very white. There was plenty of misogyny, and we both write about making a lot of things okay that weren't really okay in our hearts, just to make things smooth. And I just think about the ways in which, like, both, even though you and I are primed to be on each other's side or like encouraging to each other or in the right state of mind or, you know, fighting the good fight or whatever, all the ways that we're still brainwashed and ignorant towards each
Mm,
other's lives. In your book, you wrote about the girlfriend being left on the mattress
mm,
by her boyfriend. And when I read that, I was like, no, 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 no. You know, I had a really visceral response to
mm,
that.
mm,
And then the sister, I think, comes in and says, you know, pull her skirt down, give her her dignity or something like that. Um,
mhm,
that was a really meaningful moment to me, in part because you saw it as a male
mm,
author. There are these points of cross reference, but for instance, you know, you wouldn't in your bones know what it feels like to go out on the road as a woman, especially maybe decades ago where there were fewer and there was less conversation about, like now at gigs in the UK, here where I am, I went to see this punk show, Stiff Little Fingers, Blondie, Iggy Pop, you know, it was amazing. And there was a stand set up of Safe Gigs for Women, I think it's called. And it was all
mm,
about like, if you think you've been dosed, come to us. If you're not comfortable with who's next to you, come to us. You know, it was just this incredible. And of course, it was in like the old punk in me was like, God, in my day, you know, you just got
yeah.
on me. And then I quickly shut up. And I was just like, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. But, you know, I loved Kimya Dawson and I loved Polystyrene and I loved the Bad Brains and all these. And I didn't consider that their experience might be different in a way that I didn't understand. So I thought we were all sort of in this little violent utopia. And I grew up in New York and it was a diverse place. And my friend group was diverse when I was young and I started an anti-racist organization. So I was like, I'm right thinking about it. But there was all sorts of shit that I needed to hear. You can be right thinking, but you're still brainwashed.
Like feminism was probably like my first politic. The first thing that I needed to change. Feminism was something that I needed to learn. And I learned it through Riot Girl and Riot Girls. Even though I would consider myself a feminist, I am also a man. So I have to just listen. And I think I can only comfortably like say that or take critique because I can connect the dots to uh, race and racism. I've been in situations where I'm talking to white people about my personal experience or like presenting AfroPunk where 90 different Black punks are telling their experience. And I've had a white person stand up and be like, well, it's not like that here in Houston, you know, and I'm just like, bro. Like,
Maybe just listen.
yeah, like you have this lovely section where you talk about like girls coming up to you and being like, oh my god, I can't believe like it's so great that you're here, it's so rad to see a woman on stage or whatever. It's like this weird push and pull of like thank you.
Yeah,
And then
that's what it is.
then the flip side of that is like the dudes being like, yeah, haven't seen a chick on stage, you know, like hot, you know. And it's just like having those experiences of being like singled out. I will say that in both cases, this is not where we have to look at the long bow of history, but we can look at like just our last 20 years. I think that the efforts and agony that like our that either we or our elders laid in punk have made it drastically different and easier for kids today. I asked somebody to put together an event for Black Punk Now, so she just did a hardcore show. She called it Black Punk Now Fest, and it was 8 black fronted hardcore bands. It was hella black. Like it wasn't like kind of black. At least 3 of the 8 bands were female fronted.
Yeah.
The point is that I'm making work for a community and the community is coming out, right? And they're
Mm.
representing. And I think that that is where we can see that our work has made a difference, you know.
Mm.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's like that in Columbus, Ohio, but
Yeah.
it is happening. Black fronted bands or POC fronted bands or girl fronted bands or queer fronted bands. Like they can just be a band and like
Mm.
they can get big.
And you're working on your next book, and I'm working on my next book. Yours is a memoir going forward from the point that the high desert left, right? And it goes through the whole
Yeah.
AfroPunk years. So
Yeah.
it's
Basically like
continuation. Yeah.
15 years in New York, like
Yeah.
just learning all of these punk ethics and morals and then compromising them all to Afropunk, like to turn Afropunk into a commerce masquerading as community.
Mm. Ouch. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. My next one is it's going to be a series of short stories, fictionalized versions of either true people or true events that center around the way that trauma resonates through not just your life, but the world in these interlocking stories on this one stream.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for doing this with me. It's great.
Yeah. Thank you for doing this with me. I'm holding up
Yeah.
both our memoirs again.
Yeah. Thank you.
Keep in touch.
All right.
Keep doing great work. And I look forward to talking more. Bye,
Yeah. Everyone
James.
grab her book.